Good evening, viewers. Welcome to KDRTV, and we are very happy today to have a very special guest in our studios. His name is Pastor Sammy Ngetich. He does live in North Carolina, but he's here visiting in Minnesota, and I'm sure most of you have been really blessed to either host him in your homes or you have listened to him in churches. I'd like to welcome him to our studios. So my name is Scholastica Kanya for KDRTV, and welcome Pastor Sammy Ngetich to the studio.
Thank you, Mrs. Kanya. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So without wasting much time, we have to go straight to the questions. So the first one is, Pastor Ngetich, how do you set up a foundation in marriage for good parenting in the United States for diaspora parents? Because here life is kind of structured in a way that we have limits as to how we can discipline our kids. So what is your advice to parents in diaspora?
For parenting to be successful, it does require a foundation for the marriage. And I like to be able to add by reading the verse in the book of Psalm 127. And David says in 127 of the Psalm, "Unless the Lord builds a house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards a city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb his reward." So what I want to say is that before we think about parenting, it is important that we ask ourselves, what is the foundation we want to build? For those who are not married, what kind of a spouse am I looking for? So unless the qualities we're looking for are the ones that we would like to be able to have reflected in our children, in terms of their temperament, in terms of their spirituality, in terms of the rootedness of their character. Because love and relationships and beauty can always be added, but if the root foundation is not solid, then later on you'll have to struggle with parenting. For those who are already married, the question is, how do we come together in order to be able to form a solid foundation in terms of the values that we have, in terms of the direction we want to see our children go, in terms of prioritizing the time and the energies with all the other things we are supposed to do. So if our foundation in a relationship is solid, then it will be easier to be able to transfer that solid foundation to build a pillar so that those children can have a solid foundation, and therefore you can be able to scaffold their own lives into a trajectory that you want to see them go. So that is the first thing that I want to see. The other thing that is important is to be able to understand not only the seasons of marriage, but the seasons of parenting. How do you parent a small child versus one that is a toddler, versus one that is an early teen, versus one that is a young adult? Because as you begin, there is a lot of hands-on, more authoritative guidance and parenting. But as they begin to grow, then you begin to enable them to be able to think, to be able to critique, to be able to interrogate issues when there are peer pressures and other things. How do they look at this and say, what is the best choice? Mm-hmm. What will be the consequences of this? What about this? But as they move on, you're empowering them more and pulling away so that you're more of a cheerleader rather than making decisions for them. Wow. Even when they're young, you can give them two choices. These are the dresses I want us to go to church. Is it this one or this one? Rather than say, you know, which one do you want? Because there are so many choices. And as they move into teenage and all that, then now you're trying to see what mistakes are they making and how are they learning from that. Mm-hmm. So it changes the paradigm of the parenting as the years go by.
Wow. There, viewers, there you have it. That is Pastor Ngetich. So the second question that was asked was, what is the most difficult part in raising kids in diaspora?
When you live in diaspora, one of the things that you quickly understand is you are immersed in a different culture. When you are home, you're surrounded by a culture that is familiar, with the parameters that you understand. But when you go into a different culture, there is a culture shock, and the children you're going to raise will be operating with a different frequency. So while you're talking in a different frequency, and the other person is talking with another different frequency, because they have a new worldview. So the worldview you come from is different from the worldview that they're growing. And you're not actually raising a Kenyan, neither are you raising an American, you are raising a global child. So how do you interrogate the cultures you've come from and the culture that this child is growing from, so that you begin to give them the roots from the culture they have come from, but their leaves and their stems are growing, breathing the oxygen of a new culture. So how do you synchronize these two cultures so that you can be able to empower this child getting the good from this culture and the good from this, and throwing away the junk from each of these two cultures? So the biggest problem is when we are home, we have the support of the extended family, the tribe, the clan. And the roles are also very solid. Each person knows, whether male or female, you know the prescriptions of who does what. But you are in an area where things sometimes are upside down, and children seem to know more information than the parents, but then they assume that that information equals wisdom and life navigation skills. So the question then would be, when the roles are different or diffused, how then do we navigate and chart the direction we want to go, seeing that there's influences coming from a new culture, seeing that there is the social media coming in, seeing that this child is trying to live in two cultures? How do they do trying to be able to get a culture from this and a culture from this and put it together? So how do you navigate this? So we need what we call culture brokers to be able to negotiate both sides and translate the signals coming from this culture and this other culture. So if we are not working together, this is therefore why it is important to synchronize the minds of the husband and the wife, and for you to agree on the principles you want to inculcate in these children. Because if you clash, then the child will quickly triangulate you. That is, they get in between you and separate you. So when they separate the two of you, then before long you're fighting. And one child takes sides with another parent against the other. And before long, both of you have fallen apart, because children know very well who to be able to leverage to get what they want.
Wow, that is really powerful. Thank you very much for that message, for making us understand that we are raising global children. And another way you told us that the children can triangulate us, that's how children take sides. At least now most of the parents will understand that. And I'm going to go to a very special topic that was not here. We do have families right now here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who are really struggling with depression. Teenage depression is very, very rampant right now here. And I would like to really know your views, or what message would you have for families who are dealing with these issues right now?
The question of depression is a very complicated topic that really needs time on its own. Because not only are we dealing with issues of depression that are related with acculturation issues, because the parents themselves are struggling with navigating and adjusting to the culture in this. When we come here as immigrants, women are the fastest to acculturate, followed by children, and men always have the biggest trouble. Because of that, then you find that women are very adaptable to be able to pull a different culture in and understand. And children always, our children are the fastest to acculturate, followed by women. Excuse me. As a result of that, then you find that the husband is left anchoring on the other side against 2/3 of the weight. Now, then that causes tension and problems as a result of that. Children also have to deal with sometimes parents pulling in the other direction of the culture that they come from, and this child has to navigate a new culture. And so this child is held in between, and the child is supposed to be able to navigate the two and interrogate both of them. As a result of that, they are caught in the mix and in the crossfires between the two cultures. And if they do not get help to know how to navigate this, the other issue is that children may also be caught in the midst of racism, prejudice and discrimination, and they have to deal with this when for the first time they begin to realize that they are black. Not because they didn't know that, but when blackness of your melanin begins to be an issue that people want to use to be able to judge the brilliance of your mind and how to treat you and how to be able to accept you, then that becomes an issue that children have to deal with. And if children sometimes are pulled in one direction and the other, that tension becomes a problem. The other problem too is that back home, the children will get the support of the extended family. Not only are they dealing with mom and dad, but sometimes aunt is around, sometimes uncle is around, sometimes the neighbors are teaching the language, they are playing, they are running up and down. But in the diaspora, most of the time, you're bound to going to school and back to your room. And there is very little time to be able to climb trees and to be able to go into nature and to be able to explore who you are in the extended family. So when you go to school and you're not doing too well, then that defines your self-esteem. Then you're judged because of beauty and all these things. There are likes in social media, and that becomes an issue. And if you're black, for example, and people begin to associate this with the emblem of shame, then that begins to hit your self-esteem so many times that when you come home, parents may not understand this because they are growing in a place where their teenage time was done in an accepting community, in a communal society, where they helped you to be able to derive the importance of who you are, not only from your name, but your great-grandfather who you are called after. And grandma would be singing the glories of her husband, who you are named after. And the whole entire village will be singing the glories of your tribe or your clan and all this. But there is nobody here to sing those songs for you. Yeah. So, talking a little bit about depression, it is important for us to understand what is going on in the brain. See, the brain, as it were, is three computers fused together. There is right here, if you hold your hand that way and fold it this way, this part of the brain is the prefrontal lobe of the cerebral cortex. This is the cerebral cortex from the face going back. Then inside here, if you went through here and through here, right in the middle, what is covered by my fingers is the limbic system. That is the emotional center of the brain. And then this is the brain stem that controls the autonomic nervous system, the breathing, the circulation, and all this. But the area I'm interested in is in the limbic system, the emotional center. And sometimes we've been brought in a village where sometimes you are told, you know, who are you? You're nothing. You know, you will not amount to anything because, you know, you're going out, you bring the animals, and then, of course, they add somebody's maize, and you are spanked for that. And the following day, you're able to take care of that, but the goats escaped, and then you get a spanking for that. And then the next day, you are able to take care of those two, but the calves, you know, drank milk or, you know, are able to suckle, and then you get a punishment for that. And you come back and you want to do the same racing with your child in that emotional area, reflecting how the life that you had, that becomes a problem. So when this area is agitated, then it switches off the prefrontal lobe. It's almost like you're jumping into a survival mode, and it switches the electricity that goes into the thinking part, and children begins to go into a depression as a result of that. The neurotransmitters in the brain, particularly dopamine, serotonin and norepinephrine, are poured, and because of so much tension that they are dealing with at school and at home, it depletes the neurotransmitters, those three chemicals that I talked about, and the child enters into a clinical depression. So understanding also what is going on, and finding support system from other people that are close to you, and trying to be able to build a village around, even here in the US, in this hectic environment, or taking time to take them home sometimes so that they can be able to reconnect with the continent, or having spiritual fellowship through churches and through friends so that they can be able to mingle with people who look like them, that their self-esteem may be restored. Taking time also as a parent to praise your children, to be able to look at where they have done well, then thank them for what they have done, rather than always looking at what wrong they have done. These are the things that might be able to help reduce this issue of the depression. But much more than that is to get help when you realize that this is getting beyond me, either through the pastor or even a professional counselor who can be able to address this. The danger sometimes is we jump so quickly into the clinical world and they want to medicate the child immediately rather than address some of the issues incrementally, from simple remedies, simple interventions, to a place where it might be necessary to be able to, explore medications, but that should not be the first thing you need to try.
Oh, okay. So, and how do we, in diaspora, how do we restore the self-esteem of our children, like from when they come from back home and they get the culture shock and you don't know what to do with them? What's your advice in trying to restore their self-esteem?
First of all, it is important, if we can, to be educated as much as possible about the country that you're going before you leave, so that you are not going there ignorantly and you hit a wall. Two, once you enter there, it is important to be able to find a support system, people that can be able to help acculturate those that have come in. And number three is not only those that helps immediately, but to be able to be involved in a group, whether through the church, whether through an organization, whether through social times on the weekends, even though people are so busy. But as far as your children are concerned, think about the advantages that you had growing up. How can I and my wife prioritize time for them, in as much as we are supposed to be able to work different shifts? But as we do that, how do we catch them doing good and help them, to praise them for that? There is a time also when I may have to sit down and say, I'm disappointed about this. But take time to be able to praise those children. Take time to be able to say thank you for this. But help them also understand that they are part of something larger than themselves. So that the competition they may be facing in school, in the neighborhoods, they may understand who are you and whose are you. If they understand that they're a child of God, if they understand that they're a child of not only this family, they're the entire tribe, that there are people in Kenya where you belong, where you are the elite. You may be seen here as backward or black or whatever, but there is a place where they know one of our own has gone to the land of the white man. And they will be able to excel and make a difference there and come to make a difference here. And then the other question also is, what do you want to do to make a difference when you grow up? It's not what job do you want to do, what vocation or discipline, because by the time 20 years from now, this will be a different world where even some of the jobs we are thinking about will not be there, and there will be new. But what difference do you want to make? And let them see that there is that dream that can be able to help them reach the goal of making a difference both in this country and in the country where they have come from. Thank you very much for that, Pastor Ngetich. That is very understandable. And the last question that I have for you is, how do you discipline a child in a loving and correcting way so that they don't feel the pressure of being disciplined? In the book of Proverbs, the Bible tells us something very interesting in the Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. The Bible talks about raising children, and it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Part of the training of children involves discipline. But before we think about discipline, the question would be, what exactly do you want to address? Because sometimes, if you do not look to understand what do I want to correct, and what do I want to achieve, and what is the issue that I am taking issue with. Because if it is a knee-jerk reaction because of what the child has done or said that has pissed you off, and you are disciplining them for making you mad, then it is an issue with you and not the child. But if you are, the first thing you need to do, as husband and wife, if your wife is there, to be able to share this and express what your concern is. So that when you begin to understand exactly what is the diagnosis of the problem. Could it be that this child is tired, depressed? Could it be that this child has been disappointed about something? What about if somebody has been inappropriate with this child and they come in and they bang the door and you're so mad, and how many times have I told you about banging that door? And you ground them and you hit them, and then they go to their room and say, you are concerned about that stupid door, but don't even want to know what has happened. And then it's like, wait a minute, what happened? And then they tell you about somebody that almost raped them. That door will not be important anymore. That's because right. Now you see an issue. But if you sat down and say, hey, what happened? What's going on? You hit that door and banged it. We've talked about it. Is something wrong? Something going on? Then they will tell you something that will take your attention all away from that door to the issues involved. So it is important, you and your wife, to find out what is the diagnosis of the problem. Then what will be the best steps to take and strategies to use to be able to address that issue. Each child has a different temperament and personality. They may do the same mistake. One temperament will require a different intervention than the temperament of a different child. To be able to get the same outcome, but they have to be treated differently. We're not talking about equality, but we're talking about equity. So when you do that, so number one, identify what the problem is. And identify what issues can I address, what issues do I need to delay, what things do I need to completely ignore. Because there's some things that if you ignore and you do not reinforce, they disappear. There are times when you have to address an issue head on, and there are times when you have to go around it and reward the good things and ignore the bad things, and slowly they will realize the good is being rewarded but the bad is being ignored, so that will die out. So these are some of the issues, but it also helps to be able to get another part of the brain, because when you're thinking from the prefrontal lobe of the cerebral cortex, there may be a time when your wife is dipped and connected to the limbic system, and they will tell you something else and say, honey, look, there is something different here. Let's not proceed this way. Can we hold for a minute? And when there is that time out from your spouse, pull back, talk with them, come back to that issue. You will have two brains working on it, and you'll see something that your spouse saw that you did not see. And your spouse may want to do something else, and you say, time out, can we talk about this? And you will help her see something that she did not see that you had seen. That will help in the discipline of the children.
Wow, that is very, very powerful. Thank you very much. And viewers, we will end up our session 1 of the program. Look out for a second session of this continuous program. And thank you very much for joining us.